And you were good to go whatever you want to do, Jim.
Oh, it's right. Okay, I wasn't sure if it's a panel or just me. I could just, what I'll do is let me share this real quick. I'll go through a couple of slides, and this might help us start the conversation. Some of this is a little bit of addition to what we talked about earlier. Let's give me a second here. Okay, can you all see that okay? Tim?
Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah, just a couple additional things I wanted to say, kind of reiterate about this Plan IT. And, strategic plans are kind of boring, and many times you write them and they get on the shelf, you don't go back to them. But if you don't have something that shows where you're headed in your classroom now, that's a challenge, but you got to get something in writing so you know where you're headed. I didn't get into this a lot, but along with classroom design, you may not think of this initially, but cybersecurity is critically important. I just published something yesterday. It's called
Jim, 1 second. Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. When you say you got to get it in writing, is that for internal use or for other people to know? Is that so like your department knows where it's going, or so the president knows where you're going? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, where your president or in other words, like for example, some classroom teams report to the provost and because teaching and learning. Others report to the CFO of a business. Both should have a copy of that, but not so much the president, but your vice chancellor should have a copy of that. And then we, at least in Wisconsin, we have to send our IT plan to system, but generally that doesn't include a lot of classroom. They tend to focus on networking and infrastructure. But I think that's, at least on your campus, you should have at least a plan for your own IT group, depending on how you organize, Tim. But that's a good question. Yeah.
Tim, if I could add one thing, Jim, sorry.
Yeah,
I think it is important for your team to have the specific IT team, because you're going to ask them to make a lot of decisions quickly, and you want to empower them and give them the structure to make good decisions at that moment, even though they might not be the right one in the end. They did it for the right reason. So I do think it's important, and we often forget to talk to our own staff about where we're going sometimes.
Good point, Matt. And what we have also learned, believe it or not, in the pandemic, what we do, I'm not sure what each of you are as far as your remote work right now, but for example, Monday through Thursday, I meet with for an hour usually with networking and system admins. Okay. And then the next hour I meet 4 days a week with the managers, and that's a lot of meeting time, but it isn't this idle chit chat, as we say. It is about, this is what we're doing. These are the problem areas. And what's interesting, universally, they said that we've had the best communication we've ever had in IT, and it's in a pandemic. Even I'm blown away with that. And then what we do once a month, which talks about teamwork, we do an all staff meeting for 30 minutes. And it could be, a project. Someone can talk for like 5 minutes about it. And then we might do something socially sometimes. But and I think, I hope, I don't know if Pete's or Terry's on, that's been successful, I think, so far. And I'm actually going to miss that in some regard if we go back, or when we go back to classes or on campus, because you think you communicate well. It wasn't until the pandemic we realized that by focusing on these remote conversations, we're better informed. But I concur.
It's funny, Jim, because you have insight that like my CIO and I don't have when it comes to communication. And we're lucky we hired a marketing person and communication person for our team.
Did you?
The feedback is constantly, we don't share enough, we don't share our wins or whatever. And right before the pandemic, if we hadn't done that, I can't even imagine the communication throughout all of that.
Oh, wow. That's pretty, having some foresight to have someone in your area. You're seeing that more and more, to have a kind of a communications person to do that. As I'm looking at the group, Terry, who's on here, he's our technical wizard, but he's my success manager too. You want to talk about that, Terry?
Well, before we even go there, Jim, just to share, Jim has got a very unique background for a CIO. Really, he was a mass communications major, so communications was where he started as an undergrad, and he's taken that leaps and bounds. And I think he and I both In fact, we both have a background of mass communications, whereas he kind of went more the photography, videography route. I went into the broadcasting end of things, radio and television. But the point being is that need to be able to communicate clearly and effectively was kind of our base of operations, our foundation, which is so important, and all of us know that. I mean, it's like one of the number one skills one has to have is to be a good communicator. Now, the success management role that Jim mentioned, I've been really embracing that. Basically, what that means is I take a look at our ticketing system with all of the input we're getting from faculty, staff, and students with issues. And if tickets kind of have fallen between the cracks, no one has really taken ownership for the ticket, or the ticket has been open for longer than 30 days with no activity, I'll jump on that and try to help make sure that that ticket is taken care of, that the customer feels that success has been reached in solving their issue. And again, the main part of that, whether I myself can actually fix their issue, I want to communicate to them to let them know that we care about them, that their issue is important to us, and that we are following through to get this ticket rectified. So that's all part of success, and it starts with that communication factor.
Thanks, Tino. You gave a little congratulations for our success of Terry. So go ahead, Tino.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Terry had to say, and I just want to say, Jim, it's nice to see that you're still out there doing great things. I don't know if you remember me, but we had lunch a couple times many years ago. I used to work for Colleen Garrity at UW-Platteville.
Oh my gosh, that's right. Now I remember. Sure enough, I didn't recognize you with your headsets on.
Well, I don't think I kept the pandemic beard back
That's
then
right.
either.
I remember the name. I remember. Yeah, it's good seeing you again. So anyway, yeah, it's been Terry's been very helpful and successful. I think initially the staff members were not quite sure about this because they look at it as it made Pete's laughing. Well, why is Terry checking on me? And it wasn't that he was checking. He was checking on the customer communication, and because of Terry's background, he's a great communicator, and we tried it out. It's not an additional pay, unfortunately, for Terry, but he saw the value in it. And when you see our ticket count go down, I think it really helps out. So thank you, Terry. The other thing I was going to point out is that I was going to talk about security, and I just did something for the Center for Digital Education it's an article called Cybersecurity is a Marathon, because I run, not a marathon, but that's what it seems like. But it's a good way of looking at the metaphor of how you look at cybersecurity. And that does move into the classroom environment with passwords and locking things down and security awareness. And then we actually did a video with that as well. And you can look it up. It's called The Cyber Zone, Your Path to Disaster. And what we did is we used the motif of one-liners in movies because students had to watch this. And since you know movies, you know the term or the sentence, you can't handle the truth, or all these different. I think it can help engage people on that. Some might look at it as boring. To talk about cybersecurity, we made it entertaining, and we had a special appearance by Mayhem from the insurance commercial as well. So I just want to say security is all very important. I don't want to belabor it, but communications. The other part is being proactive. Administrators like when people can think beyond what could happen, but the trick is if you don't have good communications, it's hard to be proactive. So they're kind of synonymous. And then the other thing is quality of service. That gets back to what Terry was talking about, success management. The other thing is what we do is I do connect with the different deans throughout the year. And then I also encourage our staff. Sometimes people in IT in classrooms may feel uncomfortable, but I like to put people in roles where they can talk to people administratively. And also we talk about the politics. Sometimes we'll have staff meetings where I'm kind of open as much as I can, but it helps to understand the politics of why decisions are made. And there, as Pete can address, we're dealing with a political situation with equipment right now that I won't go into specifics, but they have an issue with some equipment not working correctly. And they're still frustrated, but I engaged myself to listen to what they had said and try to be their advocate and working with a company to fix the problem. And we're still in the midst of that, but that's where as your supervisor, you need to listen to your staff. They're not always right, but unless you listen to their concerns and take it with some empathy, you won't be successful. And this is the other thing someone asked the question where I spend most of my time. I would say at least half my time is in personal management. I'm not officially trained with that, but I had one graduate course, but that's critical. I know that's not specific to what we're talking about today, but unless your team can function cohesively, you will not be successful. And the other thing I've spent time on is interventions, which I don't like doing. But I remember one intervention I had to have with two staff members in IT. We're not getting along, so I asked them in my office, and it's always uncomfortable because they're right in front of each other and they didn't like each other. And I said, well, who would like to begin speaking? And one individual said, I'll start speaking. And he turned to the other employee and says, well, I think that you lie and you're incompetent. And that's how we started the meeting. 90 minutes later, we were in a better place. And I won't say they're buddies, but they had to go through that process of being honest with each other. And why do you feel that way? And sometimes I think IT could use the HR department itself sometimes.
And Jim, Terry and I thank you for getting us through that.
I'm not sure who said that, but yeah, no, you guys get along just fine. But yeah, that's hard to hear those kind of things, but it's the reality of how we work. And in a pandemic environment, it's even more challenging. And you want to make sure people feel valued, but also I learned this from someone else. We had a previous CIO who applied for a job here, and we're having some difficulties. And when we interviewed him, he asked the managers a question, which I thought was one of the most insightful questions I've ever heard. He looked around the room and said, do you feel empowered? And I looked at the managers, they all looked down with their feet. And that he knew and we knew there's a problem. And so I use that in my slides that if people don't feel empowered, you're never going to be successful. And here's some challenges that are pandemic related. I think we have to be aware of. Can you be flexible? We talked about cybersecurity. Salary is going to be an issue going forward. Can you afford the salaries to bring the staff in? The other thing is telecommuting. I wanted to bring up because you want the best staff you can, and if staff leave your current environment, that's going to have to be part of the benefit package somehow. And some schools are looking at, well, we can't do that. I'm a firm believer you can do telecommuting. Unfortunately, classroom team, it's hard to do telecommuting because you have to support the classroom. But I think there needs to be more flexibility with that. And I'm in kind of a buffer in our campus, at least in IT, to provide that. I may lose the battle, but I think people can work from home at least some of the time, as Terry's proven today. Knowledge transfer is also important.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Just kind of going back, combining C and D together, salary and telecommuting.
Yeah.
Are you seeing issues of IT staff having the benefit of telecommuting and possibly higher salaries because now they can work from home and, they're not at the university anymore?
That's right, Walter. That's a great observation. I see that people, I think the power's in the employee now. They can go wherever if you want to and work from home. And I think that's going to be a challenge for if you have a traditional campus that expects, like Walter, that you would be at your desk. That's going to be a challenge. And I think it's nothing official. You don't see it in writing, but I have 3 positions that are open. And in the ad, I put in your computer and office awaits. I did that strategically just so people would think about it. But when we want to hire the best students or the best people to work with students and faculty, it's going to be my job to convince the administration, depending what their stance is going to be. We have a great candidate, but they want to work from home 3 days a week. what are you going to do? And I think that's going to be for HR and for administration, that's going to be a tough decision to make. But I think you're right. It's going to be a more mobile work environment. I've read from Gartner and other Forrester, and they're saying some corporations are saying you're never going to come back to work. They're planning for that now. So for public education, we're not a corporate entity. How we're going to navigate having people who want to work from home. I think that enterprise can work from home. I think system admin can work from home. I think classroom could, since I have two colleagues here, I think 4 days a week is possible in my mind. But it's hard to be at home when there's people in the classroom and things don't work. I think networking, I think that could be a 3 or 4 day off on, like a 3-2 split maybe. For me, I'm usually here 2 or 3 times a week. But for my situation, I'm on call 24/7. So I'm always available, unfortunately. That's part of the job and how I want to provide service. But it depends on the job. But you're right, Walter. I think it's going to be kind of difficult and tough decisions.
Jim, sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
Sorry, I actually have been really ruminating on this because my team, I think, could be home. But what's really convinced me, and the way that I've been using languaging on campus, is that our classroom is no longer just the physical spaces. It's the Zoom room where the faculty decides to teach from their office, their home, the student's office, home, library, wherever. And so a portion of we have to rethink our entire structure for classroom emergency and support. And to me, that lends itself to having people that are working online at home who really understand the stuff that they're doing and the challenges that are there. And I think that that's the argument that I'm going to use as I try and get my people to have time.
Mm-hmm. A good point. That's a great point, Matt. I'll add this. This is public. We're in Wisconsin. We're going through something called IT as a service, and what that means is that they're trying to consolidate those. So what they're looking at is hiring some of the staff on each of the campuses to work at University of Wisconsin system. So what are the benefits? One is more money. The second benefit would be work from home. Okay, so let's say you have staff at your campus that are eligible and they apply, they get the job. But there's people who still work with you who don't have that benefit. They were not hired from system. They're not getting the raise, and they have to be at school. So that's going to put a strain that I think people have not really thought through very carefully. It's the haves and the have-nots, and that's going to be another challenge that's going to come forward, I think. And so when you're looking at potential of losing staff, the reason I put knowledge transfer is that you need to do that even anticipating people before they might leave, and to make sure you have documentation on how your classrooms work, process that you have, and make sure you have that, because when the new person comes in, your existing staff have to share that information. That takes time too. And then of course, retention, how do you keep people engaged and want to work for you or with you? And how you do that, this is why I'm going to bring this slide again, and I brought it earlier. I've used these a number of times and at different sessions, and I can't overemphasize these, that maybe you look at this. I mean, there may be some administrators that say, well, Jim, why do you have empathy on there? Well, you got to have empathy for your staff or you're not going to be successful. And the other part is, that's
one of the very first things we tell our students, when you walk into a classroom and the teacher has just completely failed something, do not make them look like an idiot, just figure it out. Yep, we got it, no problem, even though it's well, it wasn't plugged in, or turned on, because it happens, right? You gotta have that personability with it, right?
Right. And that goes within, that's a good point, Tim. And it's also within our staff. I've been in situations where, because I work in the world of IT, tickets are important. And so I was in a conversation, well, unless you put in a ticket, we're not going to do it. And this is to another staff member in IT, okay? Or I've heard a comment, well, I didn't do this for another IT staff. I felt they should fall on their face. That is not how you create teamwork. And so how do you fix that? You don't call the staff member out in public. So what you do is you call them later and say, hey, Joe, you know, what you said is offensive to your staff, and it's not. If you want to mentor your staff, and if you want to be a manager, you can't talk about that way in a meeting. You can't have that mindset that you're purposely going to make someone fail on your team because either there's too much time or you didn't follow the process that you want to see yourself. So that comes back to that personal management, that it's constant. But if you want an effective team, you got to spend the time to do it. And so that's just kind of some of the things I wanted to talk about there. The training we talked about earlier, in the resources, you can see some of the video that we did. I will highlight the ones I really like are hands-on technology, when you see that. And then we did one with a faculty institute with the students I turned loose. They did a kind of a rock, not a rock opera, but not a conference. What am I trying to think of? A rock concert kind of motif that was very successful. And then I kind of went through these kind of a little quickly, but this part about being engaged and connected, I think is important in this. And your whole idea of your facility, your environment has changed so fundamentally that I don't know what's going to look like in the fall semester. We're just gearing up now where we're going to continue virtual access for students. I'm anticipating there'll still be social distancing. I think there'll still be situations where people will be masked indoors. In a previous AV Summit meeting, which I didn't get into, a number of the people in the group had the foresight to think about, you design the classroom, but what about the paths to get to the classroom? So early in the pandemic, people in this group were thinking, if students are walking into the classroom, people are exiting the classroom, and they are coming in alignment with each other. And they certainly weren't masked. So the exit and entrance strategies was also part of the classroom design, which, again, there could be another pandemic we're not anticipating, but I think these are the kind of lessons learned that we have to think about.
Robin, wait 1 sec, Jim. Robin, do you have a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to barge in like this.
No, that's okay. This is interactive. So go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, because, well, thank you for putting all the pieces in the puzzle in one box. I really enjoy your overview of all the challenges. But in Norway, I would call it from panic to planning. When COVID hit, we just moved all our face-to-face lectures scheduled directly onto the hybrid or online environment. And this really didn't work out. After a while, we found out that this is not good. The students get Zoom fatigue, and the pedagogy was not right. I mean, you have to change your pedagogy depending on where you are. So if you think about one axis with pedagogy and one with the physical, hybrid, or online room or space, how do you make the transitions between these pedagogies and these spaces? If you're a teacher, how do you continue your pedagogy between these spaces? How do you tell the students to move between these spaces? And how do you use the technology to create this kind of, let's say, continuing spaces and pedagogy? It's a big question, but yeah, sorry.
That's the $64,000 question. So when I get the check, Robin, I'll be able to answer it. I think the challenge I see, you make a great point. So there are some faculty that feel comfortable teaching online, others do not. The other thing is the definition of what does it mean to teach online? Some faculty have the definition, I'll take my existing syllabus and put an online course and I'm done. That's not how it works. And I think the other part is I'll do an hour lecture and then I'm done. So I think the pedagogy is you need people like yourself and advocates to explain, for example, in a virtual environment, chunking is what you need to do. And what that means is my background in graduate school is in instructional design, to add to the myriad of backgrounds I have. And what we learned is it's better to do a 2-minute or 5-minute video than an hour video and chunk it. So learn from lesson A in a short segment, and then chunk that with lesson B in short segments, and then they come together and then review them. So it's this continuum is point A, point B, point C, and doing shorter segments. Would it be, the other thing I've learned is to think outside the box. You have a beautiful country. If you're teaching biology, take your iPhone and shoot the fjords. And you see, for 5 minutes, to show it and have the faculty in that space, and help them do that is better than watching an hour lecture with a PowerPoint with tons of bullet points. So it's a matter of changing how faculty teach. And you're not going to do that with the 30-year-old, I saw you were laughing, faculty member who doesn't know how to email, does not want to email. And I have to tell you, I don't think he sent the email. I think he had a student send the test back to me, to be honest with you. So I think it's a matter of, and this is where, and a real life example, at our campus, there's been a disconnect between the technologists and the teaching and learning group. And that happens sometimes because it's the people who deal with the pedagogy don't have a connection with the people who do the technology. And there's a disconnect there. And unless you have that connectivity, it's difficult to be successful. For example, at your institution, who does the training? Is it the technologist or is it the teaching and learning people? It should be both. And that will help you get to that solution. Is it going to happen overnight? Absolutely not. It isn't. It's a process you develop. But the key is I found also to help with this continuum problem that we all have is to find 2 or 3 faculty members who really want to work with you and to have successes. I will tell you, I had one faculty member who, there's 5 of them. I want to engage. And do you remember the series Project Runway with Heidi Klum? It was a fashion where they'd have people get voted off for not a good design. And so what I did is I followed 5 faculty members through a semester, and I was the host, the Tim Gunn with the wire rim glasses. So I'd go in the classroom, they'd film me. What are you doing today? How can we fix this? Tell me what you're working on. And then they'd all come on stage, and I kind of consolidated this for time, but we would vote them off because either they didn't do a good job of teaching or they used the wrong technology. And the winner was the faculty who did it all, planned ahead. And we all applauded. And it was great. And we presented it at EDUCAUSE as a TV show. And then we had the winning faculty way in the back of the auditorium and said, would you like to meet the winner of Project Runway? Or I always call it Project Technology. And so he's in the back of the room and the light came on and he came to the front of the room and we had a good dialogue about why was this faculty member successful? Because what he did is that he had the students help the faculty member with some of the curriculum, which some faculty think that'd be heresy. But what the students were doing were vodcast on how to use math equations on an iPad. And they were recording them for other students. And what we found is the students preferred to hear from the grad student than from the professor because they can relate to them. Now you have to have a faculty member willing to take that critique, not criticism, but critique, and embrace it. And that's kind of thinking outside the box again, Robin, where you're changing the dynamic. Now you're having students working with faculty to create curriculum and doing modules. That's pretty out there, highly successful. And I will tell you the last part of that, he was working on, remember MOOCs were so big? MOOCs were those free. So what I did for him is that for those who don't know about MediaSite, a streaming tool, I invited him to come down to Madison for a corporate webinar. And he had never done a webinar. And we're driving down to Madison. I could tell he was a little nervous. And so we get into the studio. And if you're familiar with TV, this shouldn't bother you. But I was watching before the global webcast, and they do the countdown. 5, 4, and I'm watching him fidget because he's getting really nervous. And the MC says, this is great. We have 60 countries online right now from all over the world. And he's just fidgeting, 2, 1, we're live. And I did the introduction because I thought it'd be easier for me to start. Bob, tell me about your MOOC. And as soon as we switched to him, he was on autopilot because it was a discipline he understood. Is a discipline he felt comfortable. He spent the next hour talking flawlessly, and it was very successful. The disadvantage is that he took it a little too much to his head and decided he was a rock star on webinars. So he took it to a whole nother level. But what was great about it is that you embrace a tech advocate for you. You see?
But now let me see. Now, does that get a little jaded? Because sure, the people who like technology are going to be the advocates, but you need to get technology for the people who don't like technology, and that's always going to be the problem. You'll never have enough technology in the room for the person who likes technology. It's never enough. It's having the people who don't want it be able to work with it. I feel like that's the issue.
Right.
Not you could, I don't care, you do the most cutting edge thing. Still not good enough for those few faculty, and those aren't the ones you want to talk to, I feel like.
Yep, you're right. I've had the same problem, Tim. How I navigated around that, I had a situation where we had a brand new facility. It was an auditorium and a new podium. And I remember older senior faculty member walked in. Who put this here? I'm gonna take a sledgehammer for this. I don't want this technology and just not want to embrace it. So I thought, how am I going to navigate around this? What I did is I looked for a middle-aged faculty member who was a friend of the senior faculty member and got them to embrace the technology. And then he, not me, because it can't be us, talked to him into using the new technology in the podium. It was not an overnight sell, Tim, because it's hard to change opinions past 40 or 50 years old. It's hard to change. There's a great term for those who watch TV and watch the series Monk. For those who remember Monk, he has a great line. He said, change doesn't scare me. I just don't want to be around when it happens. I think that's hilarious. And there are some with that mindset. So I think it's the strategy, and because I've seen that, Tim, over and over, that too much technology is not the technology I want to use. I want to use a chalkboard. You got to think, how can I get to them? And you're not always going to be successful, because I've had things where I thought would work, it didn't work. It's to try to find that key advocate who's willing to be on your team, and it's got to be the non-technologist, not the IT person. I found.
Looks like Walter's got a question. What do you got, sir?
Jim, going back to the previous slide where you had a bullet point on one size does not fit all. And in the general keynote, you did discuss, well, you should have, like 2 or 3 rooms that are kind of your technology, evaluation rooms where you put the technology in. Taking that to scale, we have 240 centrally scheduled classrooms at the University of Arizona. Mm-hmm. And so while it's great to have those 3 rooms that are there to kind of test out the technology, how do you balance between having a standard across all the general classrooms so instructor has a similar experience no matter which classroom they go into because they don't know which one they're going to be in next,
right?
Versus trying to get the customized situation. So just to give you an example, when pandemic hit last summer, we focused on making sure every single classroom had the ability to be Zoomable. So that meant connecting the document camera to the house computer so that the document camera could be sent out over Zoom as well as any PowerPoint presentation. That was our goal last summer, and we did it for every single classroom. And then fall and spring comes and we only use about maybe half of the classrooms on the university. But now our focus right now is, okay, people are going to be coming back in the fall, but we now have this hybrid flex where they need to be teaching both in person and online. But we don't have the money now to go and do every single classroom to make it hybrid flex. So kind of what ideas do you have on how to tackle that?
More money. No. CARES Act funding.
That's what we did last year. Yep.
I think that's supposed to be more coming, but yeah, this is not the first I've thought of this. I don't have a great solution for you. I would say that I'm going to come back to they're not just test facilities. I would like them innovation spaces, environments, and that I know they can be considered expensive because they're technology state of the art to make that happen. I also I didn't get a chance to talk about this. I saw this, I had a chance to visit the Metropolitan University in London, and they use what they call learning studios, which is a little different than a classroom. So they're a little bit more fun, and I like that term a lot. Can you bring that to scale? Not everyone can be that. There's not enough money in the schools to be able to do that. But they're not as elaborate as these innovation rooms where you're trying new things out, and not as big, but they're smaller areas that allow a little bit more interactivity and innovation on a smaller scale, less costly scale. On our campus, we're not as maybe large as yours as far as number of classrooms. I think Pete would maybe say there's maybe 220, 230 classrooms. And one of the questions, should we have two projectors in the room? I like 2 projectors, but there's a cost. You're duplicating all your costs and you're switching to make that happen. It's just a balance of what you can afford. The other thing I was going to point out, and this doesn't really answer your question, what's your replacement schedule for these rooms? Do you refresh them how often, Walter?
Well, actually, we have a sliding scale depending on the equipment. So the computers, document cameras, we're talking 3 to 4 years. Microphone projectors, more like 10 years.
Yeah, and when you look at rooms, do you look at removing or replacing individual items or the entire room?
Generally, we do, well, what we do is we do an entire room, and then we take the good equipment and then move it to another classroom. Yeah.
Yep, that's kind of common. One option would be, and actually working with Pete's group, is this was interesting because our CFO likes to do the entire room. Okay. But with the classroom team came up, well, let's replace our projectors that are bulb to laser. And not do the entire room. So strategically, long-term, you're going to reap the benefits with less replacement of the bulbs. Obviously, there's a cost savings, and hopefully recoup that to do more rooms. I think that's one strategic way of looking at it. I guess I would say smaller engagements are not to always equip everything in the classroom, make these like learning studios, but how can you make it innovative? And it would depend on the room. I mean, it's hard for me to say, right, without seeing your room, and I'm more than happy to look at it as a colleague and say, what can we do to make these innovative at a less cost? That is the trick to be able to afford those. But the other thing that I'm sure each of you can say, when you get new buildings, I'm sure you get a lot of new money to replace what the new building is going to cost you down the road. That's the other stress point we all experience. And I've been telling our CFO, it's great to have new buildings, but unless you put the money into it, you're going to get behind every year, further and further. And one-time money is great, but you're going to have to pay sooner or later. And that's where you need to have that plan, that strategic plan. Just having more and more rooms doesn't make it better for your campus. And that's where you have to be strategic. Does it make sense to put 2 projectors in your room? How many rooms do you need to have on your campus? That's the magic question. The other thing I will point out is that we used to report to the provost office, and I've seen a trend where we report to the CFO because of the business. And there's two ways of thinking of this. If you report to the provost, you'll probably be more involved with teaching and learning, but have less money. But if you work from the business side of it, you have more money and less teaching and learning. And the trick is, how do you balance those two? That's the mystery question, depending on the people at your campus and what your strategic plan is. I think also for you is, I don't know how you work at your campus, but you're the one that needs to have a seat at the table to explain this. And so people, or your CIO or your classroom team, needs to have the opportunity to kind of explain the challenge of what you're asking. Again, innovation rooms are great, but you can only go so far with them. And that's why I think learning studios is a kind of a trimmed down innovation room with still some innovation in it. I wish I had the right answer for you, but it's a tough question to answer, Walter.
We only got a few minutes left. Let's get to Matt's question then.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I almost forgot what I was going to say.
Well, I know it is. Rehire Aaron Rodgers. That's what you're going to tell me. That's great.
Well, one thing I wanted to add, Jim, to what you just said that made me think was, I think that our benefit has been that our VP CIO is on the cabinet, doesn't report to the provost or fiscal or the finance area. And that's, I think, been very helpful as we argue at a higher level. And then the other thing was more of a comment to you, Tim. If the faculty don't want to get on board, we ignore the faculty who don't want change. You know, there are simply going to be people who are unwilling or unable to change, and you shouldn't put your resources in those. Put your resources in those faculty that will work with you. They will bring the other 70% with them. And then that 20%, they're going to go or they're not going to go. And there's attrition will solve it or whatever. But I just don't see a lot of value. We don't often engage the faculty who are really negative just because the cost benefit doesn't make sense. That's all.
Yeah, great point.
That's true. It's just when it's tough when usually those ones are the most boisterous ones too, you know, and then it becomes we're trying, you know, and I think everyone's been there, you know what I mean?
But Jim actually mentioned this big, and I'm speaking for you, I'm sorry.
Please do, go ahead.
Relationships are probably the single most important thing that we talk about in IT, at least on my team. And if you have good relationships, those vocal faculty will be quieted or tamped down a little bit by the faculty who you do work with, who are positive about what's happening.
That's right. And I've seen that happen. And that's what I rely on. The relationship is one of the relationship and communications has nothing to do with technology, but I'll get you to the finish line. So that's just my 10 takeaways I talked about earlier. And then the last slide I've got really for you today really is these resources that I'll try to share with you. And if you want to screen capture them, I'll try to get these to you and you take a look, and they're entertaining, but it shows where with some great teamwork and teammates, you can get the message out there and it puts you in a good place on your campus as far as people knowing what you can accomplish and what you've done in the past and what you hope to do in the future.
Nice.
My job is done here. How's that? Now it's all in your hands to make it a success.
Any other questions or anything out there?
And feel free to reach out to me later. And other places they've asked me to help them with cheerleading. If you need a cheerleader, feel free to meet. Sometimes it's what I found is if you're not at your campus, you're an expert.
Right. So, I got one, Jim. Okay, talk about when you're trying to make a room super innovative, right? How far is too far? Because these, you know, if you're only making 3 rooms, let's say, so let's say all of a sudden a teacher is going to go and completely change their curriculum around this tech. Well, what happens when they don't get one of those 3 rooms? Now what? So how do you get super innovative when all these general use classrooms, it's not like K-12, they're not going to be there next year. So how do you get them on board to change all of that and actually go through the work? Because they don't want to do that work. They got their syllabus all ready to go. Why are they going to redo it?
Right. Well, as you're asking that question, an example came to mind, and hopefully I'll get your answer. When you have these advocacy group, like I mentioned, these academic technology committees universally, I had one faculty say, you know what, we need to make all our rooms with laptops only. And what was interesting is that she was planning the room for her. She's not the only user of that room. And what I found interesting, another faculty member said, well, you're planning for yourself. I like the idea there's a podium computer in there because I don't want to carry my laptop. And what if that laptop does not work? The classroom team is always there to fix what's in that room. If you bring your laptop in there, they have no idea where the standard is. So I think the challenge is that the rooms are not the faculties, it's the universities. And that you can decide what's in those classrooms. And that's kind of a tough sell, but I think some people go in there with the agenda that I own that classroom because I teach in that classroom. It doesn't work that way. You know, the other challenge is if you have multiple classrooms, who schedules your classrooms? Is it your records and registration? And they want uniformity. And then how do you, okay, I'm going to put this person in this room because of this technology. And I don't know what relationships, as Matt was saying, what's your relationship with the registrar as far as, do you control the room or do they control the room? Do you dictate the technology in that room? Also, do you have guides? It's when new faculty come to your campus, Tim, can they see online what is in the room, what it looks like?
The registrar has that ability.
Oh,
but it's not public facing.
Okay, yeah.
We have pictures, the tech, all that stuff. We use EMS, and it's all in there. The registrar can punch it up, and if some faculty member says we need this, this, and this, registrar can look and go, yeah, that room has that, just to make sure.
Now, is there a line that needs of one outweigh the needs of the many? Is that another movie term? I think that's the challenge, is that you've got to have uniformity for support and for scheduling. And that's where I come to this point of have these rooms that maybe if they're web conferencing rooms or distance education rooms or innovation rooms, how do they get scheduled? That's the magic question. Is it the AV group or is it a registrar, and what's your relationship with them? I think that, I don't know if I can really answer that, but it all depends is the answer I can give you, unfortunately.
That's a solid maybe.
Maybe it's a solid maybe. Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's clear as molasses. That's right.
Well, I'm going to stop recording because we're at time. So if everyone wants to head back to the lobby for lightning talks, thanks, Jim, for running this again.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that was helpful. You had great questions, by the way.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, my pleasure.